An obese noblewoman was handed over to a veteran Apache as punishment by her billionaire father, but he loved her like... The late afternoon sun glared mercilessly against the polished steel gates of Worthington Manor, a sprawling estate whose grandeur only emphasized the smallness of those who displeased its master. Lady Amara Worthington stood at the foot of the marble steps, her head bowed, her silk dress clinging uncomfortably to her curves, sweat gathering beneath the cruel grip of a corset. Her rich, dark skin glistened in the heat, but her tears she held back. She would not cry, not in front of him. "This is your punishment," Lord Alistair Worthington declared, his voice cold, slicing through the humid air like a blade. His words carried easily across the courtyard, where chauffeurs, servants, and bodyguards had paused in their duties to watch the humiliating scene unfold. "Your gluttony, your defiance, your refusal to be molded into the daughter I require, you have disgraced my name for the last time." Amara's cheeks burned with shame. At 25, she had failed to secure the wealthy husband her father had paraded her in front of season after season. Her body, full and unyielding to the strict diets and criticisms forced upon her, had been his constant reminder of failure. To him, she was proof of weakness, an embarrassment to the Worthington Empire. "Colonel James Rowan," Lord Worthington continued, his attention now shifting to the tall man standing silently nearby. "As agreed, I offer you my daughter as settlement for your service and silence. You may do with her as you see fit." Amara's head snapped up in shock. Her father could not mean this, not truly. "Father, please..." "Silence." Lord Worthington's hiss cut her off before she could speak further. "I warned you, child. I gave you every opportunity to prove your worth. Now you will learn the consequences of failure." The veteran stood rigid, his posture military even in civilian clothes. His dark eyes, shadowed by years of conflict, studied her without flinching. Unlike her father's gaze, there was no contempt in them, only a silence she could not read. Rowan inclined his head once, slow and deliberate, accepting the arrangement without flourish or protest. "She is yours now," Lord Worthington said, already turning toward his black car idling nearby. "Do what you will. I wash my hands of her." And with that, her father stepped into the waiting limousine. The engine purred to life, and the car rolled down the grand driveway without a single backward glance. Abandoned, cast off like unwanted property. Amara's knees trembled beneath the weight of what had just transpired. In a matter of moments, the life she knew, the endless soirees, the suffocating expectations, the bitter criticisms, was gone. And in its place, exile, handed over to a man her father described only as useful but broken, a man who had fought wars she could not imagine, who now looked at her with unreadable eyes. Colonel Rowan stepped forward. She flinched instinctively, expecting roughness, expecting cruelty, but he only reached for the small leather case that contained her few belongings, pathetically meager for a woman born into billions. With a brief motion of his hand, he gestured for her to follow, and with the gates of Worthington Manor closing behind them, Amara took one last desperate look over her shoulder. Her father was already gone. So was the life she had once known. The ride was long and silent. The chauffeur who had driven them to the city outskirts left without a word, and soon Amara found herself seated in the passenger seat of Colonel Rowan's battered pickup truck. It smelled faintly of leather, metal, and something earthy she couldn't place. The billionaire's daughter, who had grown up surrounded by perfume-scented limousines and spotless interiors, shifted uncomfortably. The road stretched endlessly through the countryside, the manicured estates of her world fading into scrubland and cracked highways. Amara clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders, though the summer heat pressed against her skin. Her silk heels pinched with every movement, shoes chosen for appearances, not for survival. She expected harshness from him, the broken soldier her father had described, a man who might see her as punishment as well. But Rowan remained quiet, his hands steady on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the horizon. When she asked timidly, "Where are you taking me?" her voice hoarse from hours of silence, he spoke his first word since the estate. Home. The word was simple, clipped, but it unsettled her. What home could this man have that would be fit for a daughter of wealth? Hours passed. Her throat ached with thirst, but when she shifted uncomfortably, Rowan reached behind his seat, wordlessly producing a steel water bottle. He held it out without looking at her. She accepted, surprised. When dusk fell, he pulled off the road and parked by a wooded clearing. He set up a small camp stove from the back of his truck, heating a tin of stew. He handed her a portion without comment. The flavors were plain, nothing like the elaborate meals she was accustomed to. But it was food, and she realized how hungry she was. He did not speak unless necessary, yet his silence was not hostile. It simply was steady and firm like the man himself. On the second night, the temperature dipped dangerously low. Amara shivered beneath her shawl, her body aching from the hard ground. Rowan, without a word, placed an extra blanket over her. Confused, she lay awake, staring at the stars above the clearing, wondering who this man was. A broken veteran, her father had sneered. A man with scars inside and out, used and discarded by the very empire her family profited from. Yet this man, who owed her nothing, had offered her more quiet consideration in 2 days than her father had in 25 years. By the third day, her shoes were ruined. Blisters covered her feet, and she stumbled on the gravel road. Rowan stopped, crouched, and without asking, unlaced her ruined heels. From the truck, he brought out worn military boots, too big but sturdy. "Better," he said simply. Amara, flushed with humiliation, wanted to protest, but when she took her first step in the boots, steady and firm beneath her, her eyes burned with unexpected tears. Later, sitting by the fire, she asked softly, "Why did you accept me? I'm clearly a burden." Rowan studied her across the firelight, his face unreadable. Then, in a voice rough but steady, he said, "Your father doesn't understand value." He spoke no more after that, returning to sharpening a knife with practiced precision. But Amara lay awake long into the night, the words echoing in her mind. For the first time she wondered, perhaps her father was wrong, perhaps she wasn't worthless. The fourth evening brought them into a quiet valley town, tucked away behind pine-covered hills. It was nothing like the glittering city Amara had left behind. There were no sprawling mansions, no chandeliers, no servants waiting with silver trays. Instead, there were modest homes with peeling paint, a general store with a flickering neon sign, and a row of trailers huddled near the edge of the woods. The air smelled faintly of pine, smoke, and earth. Rowan drove straight to a weathered cabin on the outskirts. Its wooden siding bore scars of age, and the porch creaked beneath his boots as he led her inside. Amara hesitated at the threshold. The interior was simple, too simple for someone raised among gold-framed paintings and silk curtains. A wood stove in the corner, shelves stacked with canned goods, and a worn sofa that had clearly seen better days. Yet it was tidy, ordered, lived in. An elderly woman emerged from the kitchen, her wiry frame wrapped in a faded cardigan. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, landed on Amara immediately. She spoke to Rowan in a quiet voice, her tone clipped but not unkind. "This is Mama Jo," Rowan said, his deep voice cutting through the silence. "She raised half the men around here. You'll stay with her." Before Amara could respond, he turned and left the cabin, leaving her in the care of the old woman. Mama Jo motioned with her hand. "Sit, child." Her voice was warm, though her eyes still measured Amara like a seamstress sizing fabric. She set a steaming mug of tea before her. "You look like you've been dragged through thorns." Amara sat stiffly, clutching the cup, its heat seeping into her palms. She didn't know what to say. That night, as she lay on a quilted bed softer than the ground she had slept on for days, Amara listened to the distant hum of cicadas outside the cabin window. For the first time she allowed herself to breathe, but the next morning shattered any illusions of ease. Mama Jo handed her a broom. "Floor needs sweeping. Start simple." Amara stared, stunned. She had never been asked, let alone expected, to clean anything in her life. Her fingers, soft and manicured, fumbled with the handle. Dust rose in clouds, and within minutes She was coughing, her arms aching from the unfamiliar motion. Later, when Mama Joe handed her a basket of laundry to hang, Amara's clumsy fingers dropped clothespins into the dirt. Children passing by giggled behind their hands, and Amara's cheeks burned. That evening, she carried a pail of water from the pump. Halfway back, her grip slipped. The pail crashed to the ground, spilling its contents. She dropped to her knees, tears stinging her eyes. "I can't even carry water," she whispered bitterly. A shadow fell across her. Rowan. She expected mockery or worse, anger. Instead, he crouched, lifted her hand, and examined the small cut where the pail's handle had bitten into her skin. From his pocket, he pulled a strip of cloth and wrapped her finger with steady care. "Don't start with what you can't carry," he said. His voice was quiet but firm. "Start with what you can." The words struck her harder than her father's punishments ever had. They weren't cruel, they weren't condemning, they were guidance. That night, when she sat at Mama Joe's table eating stew, Amara caught Rowan's eyes on her from across the room. This time, he didn't look away, and for the first time since she had been cast out, a small flicker of hope stirred in her chest. The days blurred into one another. At first, Amara stumbled at every task, her soft hands blistering, her back aching, her pride bleeding away with each mistake. But under Mama Joe's watchful eye and Rowan's silent presence, she began to change. The broom grew lighter in her hands, the water pail steadied against her hip, her once perfect nails chipped and cracked, but she no longer cared. The first time she baked bread without burning it, Mama Joe grinned and slapped her flour-dusted palms together. "Now you're getting somewhere." Children who once giggled at her clumsiness now followed her eagerly, carrying small baskets as she learned to gather herbs in the hills. When her skirt snagged on a thorn bush, she laughed, actually laughed, and tore it free without a second thought. Rowan noticed. He never praised her outright, but when he passed by the garden she had helped plant, or when he saw her split wood clumsily but determinedly, there was a flicker in his eyes, a quiet acknowledgement. One evening, after weeks of labor, Amara collapsed on the porch steps, sweat dripping down her temples, her arms trembling from carrying water all afternoon. She expected exhaustion to crush her, but instead she felt alive. Her breathless laughter startled even her. Rowan emerged from the shadows, a toolbox in his hand. He set it down and regarded her. "What's funny?" She wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. "I never thought I'd be proud of carrying water." A slow smile tugged at the corner of his lips, the first she had seen. It was gone in a heartbeat, but Amara caught it and her chest warmed. Her body hardened with the weeks. The extra weight she had carried since girlhood melted under the sun and the strain of work. Her arms grew strong, her steps lighter. The mirror in Mama Joe's hallway showed a woman she barely recognized, not the overdressed daughter of a billionaire, hidden behind jewels and silks, but a woman whose beauty came from strength, not pretense. And yet it wasn't only her body that changed. She began listening to the veterans who visited Rowan's cabin, men scarred in body and soul, carrying stories that the world outside didn't want to hear. Amara sat with them by the fire, silent at first, then asking questions, then offering quiet words. "You see people," one of them said one night, staring at her as if trying to solve a riddle. "Most folks look away from us, but you don't." It startled her, because once she had looked away too. The turning point came one stormy evening. Rowan returned late, soaked to the skin, his face grim. He set a bloodied young man on Mama Joe's table, a fellow veteran, beaten in a bar fight. Without hesitation, Amara fetched cloths, boiling water, and salve. Her hands shook, but she pressed the wounds clean, bandaged the torn skin, and soothed the man as he groaned. Rowan watched her in silence the entire time. When the boy was settled, Rowan stepped outside. Amara followed, rain plastering her hair to her cheeks. "Why do you do it?" she asked softly. "Why take care of them? No one else seems to." Rowan's jaw tightened. His voice, low and steady, carried weight. Because they matter. Every man I served with, every one of them left pieces of themselves behind. The world moves on, but I won't. Amara's throat tightened. In that moment, she saw him clearly. Not a punishment, not a broken veteran, but a man carrying burdens greater than anyone could see. And for the first time, she longed not just to survive in his world, but to belong to it. Summer ripened into autumn, and with it something within Amara changed. The chores no longer felt like punishments. She rose at dawn with a kind of eager rhythm, fetching water, chopping vegetables, sweeping floors, and even walking into town with Mama Jo. The townsfolk, once skeptical, began to nod at her in quiet acknowledgement. Children ran to greet her, tugging at her skirts. Even the scarred veterans who drifted in and out of Rowan's cabin began to soften toward her. But it was Rowan himself who confused her the most. He remained quiet, steady, always watchful. He never indulged her with flattery, nor did he dismiss her efforts. When she carried a load twice her size, he adjusted her stance so she wouldn't strain her back. When she split logs, he corrected her grip so she wouldn't cut her hand. Never too close, never too distant. It infuriated her, and it intrigued her. One evening she found him repairing the old porch railing. She hesitated at the doorway, then gathered her courage. "Teach me." He looked up, sweat glistening on his brow, surprise flickering in his eyes. Then, wordlessly, he handed her a hammer. Her blows were clumsy, her arms trembling. The nail bent sideways and she cursed under her breath. Rowan chuckled, a low, warm sound she'd never heard from him before. "Easy," he said, stepping behind her. His large hands closed gently around hers, guiding the hammer with steady precision. The warmth of his body against her back sent a shiver down her spine. "Like this," he murmured. The nail slid smoothly into the wood. She glanced up, breath catching as their eyes met. For a moment the world fell silent. The woods, the cicadas, even the setting sun. Rowan stepped back, as if realizing the closeness, his expression guarded again. But Amara's heart still raced. Days later, she found him in the shed, tending to his old military gear. Medals glinted faintly in the dim light, each one a story she didn't know. Her gaze fell on a photograph tucked between dusty boxes. A younger Rowan, standing with a squad of men, faces proud and weary, arms slung over each other's shoulders. "You miss them," she said softly. He looked at her, his jaw tight. "Every day." Her throat tightened. She reached out, almost without thinking, and touched his arm. "Then maybe you don't have to carry it alone." He didn't answer, but the way his eyes lingered on her hand told her everything words could not. The first snowfall came early. Amara woke to find the world blanketed in white, the air crisp and sharp. She stepped outside, her breath misting, and laughed aloud as flakes landed in her hair. Rowan stood at the edge of the yard, splitting wood, his breath puffing in clouds. He glanced at her, laughing, alive, her cheeks flushed, and for the first time his expression softened fully. "Beautiful," he muttered, almost to himself. But she heard it, and her heart soared. That night, as she lay beneath Mama Jo's quilt, Amara finally admitted to herself the truth. This was no punishment. This was no exile. This was the beginning of something she had never known. A life with meaning. A life with him. The quiet of winter did not last. One grey morning, as Amara and Mama Jo strung herbs to dry by the fire, the low growl of engines shattered the calm. Tires crunched against the frozen earth, louder and closer until a sleek black convoy rolled into the valley, its tinted windows flashing in the pale sun. Amara froze. Only one man moved in cars like those. Her father. Rowan was already outside, axe in hand, eyes sharp. The convoy stopped in front of the cabin, and the back door of the lead car swung open. Out stepped Elias Barlow, billionaire industrialist, a man whose presence could chill a room before he even spoke. His tailored coat brushed against the snow as he strode forward, flanked by two suited men. His cold eyes swept over the cabin, the garden, the porch, and finally landed on Amara. She felt the years collapse around her, the scorn, the punishments, the endless reminders of her failures. Her knees weakened, but she stood her ground. "So this is where you've been," Elias said, his voice smooth but edged with disdain. "Living in filth, like a stray." Rowan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He didn't move, didn't flinch, simply stood like a wall between Elias and the cabin. Her father's gaze flicked to him. "You've served your purpose, soldier. I'll take her back now." Amara's heart pounded. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught. It was Rowan who broke the silence. His voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made even Elias pause. "She isn't yours to take." The air snapped, sharp and brittle. Elias's eyes narrowed, his lip curling. "Do you know who I am?" Rowan didn't blink. "I know exactly who you are." The silence stretched. The suited men shifted uneasily, their hands twitching near their coats. Elias turned back to his daughter, his voice dripping venom. "Amara, enough of this charade. You don't belong here. You were born to privilege, not mud and labor. Look at you, sweating like a peasant, dressed like one of them. You've shamed me long enough. Get in the car." Her body trembled. The old fear gripped her, the fear of disappointing him, of being dragged back to that gilded prison. For a moment her knees bent, her heart begging her to obey. Then she looked at Rowan, silent, steady, unshaken. His eyes held hers, unyielding. And in that moment Amara realized something. She wasn't weak anymore. She wasn't worthless. She straightened her shoulders, her voice steady though her heart thundered. "No." The word sliced the air. Elias blinked, stunned. "What did you say?" "I said no. I'm not going back with you." Her father's face flushed with rage. He took a step forward, but Rowan shifted subtly, placing himself in his path. Not aggressively, simply there, a barrier no force of wealth or power could move. Elias's eyes darted between them, fury burning. "You think you can defy me? You'll regret this, Amara." But she didn't flinch. For the first time in her life, she met her father's eyes without bowing her head. "I'd regret going back with you more." That night, long after the convoy left in a storm of snow and exhaust, Amara sat by the fire, her hands trembling. Rowan poured her tea, setting the cup gently before her. "You stood tall today." She looked up at him, tears welling. "I never could before." He met her gaze, his eyes soft. "You can now." And for the first time she believed it. Elias Barlow did not accept defeat easily. Weeks passed, and though the snow melted into spring, Amara lived with the weight of his shadow. Rumors reached the valley. Her father had tried to buy the land Rowan lived on, had sent lawyers and men in suits to pressure the town council, even spread whispers that Rowan was unstable, dangerous. But each time, the community rallied. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder. Mama Jo raised her chin high, and Amara herself walked into town, facing the sneers of her father's associates with calm defiance. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in gold and violet, Elias arrived again. This time, not with cars or suits, but alone. He stood on the porch, older somehow, his shoulders heavy beneath his immaculate coat. Amara opened the door, Rowan at her side. "Father," she said, her voice even. He studied her in silence, his eyes moving from her roughened hands to the strength in her stance, to Rowan's steady presence beside her. "You've changed," Elias murmured at last. "I sent you here to be humbled, to be broken." His gaze hardened. "Instead, you stand before me, like you've won something." Amara's throat tightened, but she didn't look away. "I did win something. I won myself, and I won a man who sees my worth. Something you never did." Rowan's hand brushed hers, grounding her, steady as always. Her father's jaw clenched. For a long moment, the old fire burned in his eyes, the desire to command, to control. But then, for the first time in her life, she saw it falter. He stepped back, his voice quieter. "You've chosen your path, then?" I have, Amara said, and it's not yours. Elias's gaze lingered, searching her face one last time. Then he turned and walked into the fading light, his figure swallowed by the horizon. That night, the cabin was quiet. The only sound was the crackle of the fire. Amara sat beside Rowan, her heart still heavy with the weight of what had passed. "Do you think he'll come back?" she whispered. Rowan shook his head. "Doesn't matter. You're free now." She turned to him, her eyes shimmering. "Free to do what?" His hand found hers, rough and warm. "Free to live. With me, if you choose." Her chest ached with a fierce, tender joy. She reached up, cupping his face, and for the first time, she kissed him, not out of gratitude, not out of fear, but out of love. The firelight flickered against their faces, sealing a bond that no father's wrath, no billionaire's power could break. Amara never returned to the marble halls of her father's empire. She built a life in the valley, shoulder to shoulder with Rowan. Together they tended the land, cared for the veterans, and created a community where no soul was cast aside as worthless. The woman once mocked for her body, for her failures, for her weight, became a pillar of strength, respected, loved, and the soldier once discarded by the world found in her not a punishment, but a partner. What began as exile ended as destiny. And in the quiet valley their love grew, not gilded in gold but forged in fire, labor, and truth.